So, hey everybody, this is Janie Coffey with EXP Luxuries, open to all training on luxury real estate. And we do this once a month, always right here on the YouTube channel or however else you may be watching it, whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, watching it in replay. We always come out on the second Wednesday of every month with some kind of tactical informational training on luxury real estate. So again, my name is Janie Coffey, and I'm the co-chair of the luxury division here at EXP. And this topic that we're talking about right now is probably one of the most important topics we have right now going on in general. All the time it comes up, but specifically right now, when we're kind of in an unsure market. We don't know if the market's going up. We don't know if the market's going down. We've got national news telling us one thing, global news telling us something, local news telling us something else. And all of that kind of uncertainty filters down to our sellers. And we need to position ourselves as the experts, the voice of reason, and the people to help be there as their advisors, their expert, seasoned advisors, to help them all through the process. So we are talking about mastery of listing luxury pricing, not just when you're getting the listing, when you're going for the listing, but also how to navigate throughout the listing, price adjustments, conversations when offers come in, maybe conversations around extensions if you need it, but price is almost always kind of the foundational core element of everything, assuming you have your marketing down pat. And I'm going to assume if you're a luxury real estate agent, you do have your luxury marketing, including your media, your exposure, all of that down pat. And then it really just comes down to pricing. So with that said, we're going to jump on into it. I think I can see your comments. I'm going to check if you're dropping comments in. If you're watching this live, I'll be checking for the comments. Later in this session, we'll be popping some comments up and I'll be responding to them. So I know there's lots of things people are asking about all of these things around topics. So winning the listing is step one. And a lot of people get so excited that they've won a luxury listing. They're super excited, but really pricing it to sell and keeping it all the way through from listing to price reductions or price improvements, as we call it, if necessary, through an offer, through negotiating an offer, through closing, because those almost always wrap around pricing in the seller's head. That's truly the master skill. And it is very, very different as we go up in price point, because at that point, there's probably not any comps like you would find in a homogenous community or neighborhood. And sellers are really having to rely on us as their trusted advisors so much more, because they can't look down the street and see that 3 houses down the street and 7 houses over this way have all sold in this price point where they're getting irrefutable data. Now they really need to rely on us, our expertise, and our conversations with us. So, we really, really need to up our game in understanding that and understanding how to have high-level conversations with our sellers. We need to be able to explain to them when showings are stalling out. What does that mean? If offers aren't coming in, but we're getting a lot of views, what does that mean? And how we respond as agents to our seller will also make or break our relationship with our seller and their trust in us to be giving them the very best information for them. Because if we don't gain that trust, they're going to think that what we're telling them is for our own best interest, that we're trying to tell them something to sell it fast, have a quick sale. We're really not vested in them. And they lose trust and faith in us, and they think that we're just acting in our own best interest. And that is not at all what we want to have. And that is not what top luxury listing agents specifically have. They have really great communication skills, and they have really deep understanding of the market and how to have these conversations with sellers all along the way. So we're going to touch on many different ones. We're going to give you some great language to use, some great psychology about how sellers might be thinking and how to kind of offset that to help position them. We're going to give you the tools to position your sellers to have the tools to make the best decisions possible. So the psychology of a seller, and you can give me a thumbs up or shake your head or just think to yourself, yes, I've seen that. They often have an emotional attachment to their properties. much more than even an average price point property, because these are often very highly customized homes. They themselves might have built the home. They might have designed and built the home. They maybe have inherited the home. So there's like a long-standing family tradition with the home, or they might have done a high level renovation to the home. But we often find the higher we go in price point, there's just a lot more emotional attachment. And the emotional attachment then attaches to price, because price is value. And so they see the home like this, and anything that doesn't kind of support that is, in their mind, an attack a little bit on value of them, if you understand what I'm saying. So a lot of this has to be kind of dealt with in a very kind of strategic way, so they don't feel it's an attack on them. The price and the market and how the market and everything is not anything about them. It's just, how do we best position this to get the highest, the maximum the market will bear. That's what we always want to talk about. We want to get the highest the market will bear, assuming, and this is an assumption that you need to always clear up with your seller. Sometimes sellers, it's not the highest the market will bear. Sometimes it's discretion. Sometimes it's speed. They have other things they want to do. Sometimes it's the least amount of headaches, meaning inconvenience of having the home show ready, inconvenience of getting out of the house if they are living there, inconvenience of doing things to the house. Different sellers have different top level objectives. And part also of what we need to do when we're in the very beginning stages is find out truly what's the most important thing to them. Is it the highest price the market will bear, or let's call it the highest net the market will bear? Is it discretion? Is it ease and lack of having to do a lot of inconvenient things? Find out what it is, because price is always the great equalizer. That's the second kind of language tip I've given you. The highest the market will bear is kind of my first go-to that I talk about all the time. But understanding that price is the great equalizer for those other things. You can't have all those things. You can have normally two of those things, but you normally can't have all those things. They often believe their home is so unique that there are no comps. And somehow they feel if there are no comps that it really doesn't matter. But that's not true at all. So I'm going to talk to you now in a minute about what I do when there's no comps, because I sell historic. This is actually one of my listings. That's a historic downtown St. Augustine property. I specialize in historic downtown St. Augustine higher end properties. They're all unique. They're all different. There's normally no comps. So having a conversation around how we price that in the absence of comps, so they understand it's not just a vacuum with no other kind of data for buyers to look at. And then we talk about the expectations of like the billionaire buyer. Of course, they're not normally billionaires. Sometimes they are, but for sure, these are more wealthy buyers, and these are smart buyers. And the reason I say that is when sellers say, oh, well, there aren't any comps, they're often just imagining this kind of mythical person to drop out of the sky, to not care about pricing whatsoever. They have a ton of cash and they're just going to offer whatever because they think it's so special. Again, because it's often attached emotionally to them in some way. But we talk about buyers at the higher price points. These are successful people. These are people who have wealth that they've either accumulated, they've inherited or something, but they are normally business people. They are strategic in their decision making. They're thoughtful in their decision making. They're just not, willy-nilly making all kinds of things. So we talk about it has to also make sense to a buyer. And so what I do in the absence of comps is I will kind of pull out tranches of price points. So that might be $500,000 brackets. That might be $250,000 brackets. That might be $1 million or $5 million brackets, wherever you are. So let's say I have a property and the seller wants to price it. In my market, 3.5 million would be a high priced property. It is in the top 0.5% of my market. Let's say the seller wants to price a property at 3.5. I, as an educated, skilled agent in my market, think this is really like a $2.7, $2.8 million property. instead of saying, oh no, that's not going to work, I would probably say, okay, let's look at what else buyers would be looking at, and let's look at what other buyers have bought in these price ranges. So I would look at 3.5 million to 4 million, and I would pull within the geographic area the other houses available in that 3.5 to $4 million range, as well as what's pending and what's sold. And then I'd pull in the 3 to 3.5 million, and then I'd pull in the 2.5 to 3 million. And I'd just say, let's look at this. Do you feel your home, when we look at all the aspects of your home, the size, the location, the special elements, things like that, I say, let's look and compare it to the other houses. And there's somewhere in there, it's going to make sense to them as a buyer where it's going to fall. And just doing that alone often brings them to their own decision of wanting to, maybe they realize that 3.5 or whatever price isn't really right. Maybe they say, okay, let's try at 3.2. Say, okay, fine. We can always test the market for a limited period of time. I want to test the market. I want to make sure that you are comfortable that we have earned the highest the market will bear, the best the market will bear. But I like to do that. That's very, very helpful to them. The other thing I do in the absence of comps, I certainly pull what other things have sold for. If we're in the price point where a mortgage is probably still going to be involved, and the reason I say in the thing, at a higher and higher price point, there's less and less chance that a mortgage is involved. They're often cash buyers, or they're buying in some other way that's not involving a mortgage. But if a mortgage is going to be involved, I also point out the importance of this property is going to also have to appraise. You might be in a market where appraisal waivers are okay and buyers are willing to pay over appraisal, but a lot of markets aren't. So I explained to them how appraisers view properties, what appraisers give value to and what they don't always give a high amount of value to. So I have conversations like that so they can see it's not just what they want to sell it for, but it's also what is a buyer, what's going to make their home so compelling that they're willing to buy this house versus another house. And again, if a mortgage is involved, will they be able to meet value and go ahead and close. So we have those kind of conversations. And I just try to make it very factual about how the process works so that they can kind of pull back a little bit from their emotions. And sometimes, like I said, we do have to test the market. And I'll get into that a little bit more in our presentation about how you test the market, but not too long so that you don't allow the listing to become stale, but you do test the market so that your seller feels completely convinced that you've done everything possible to get the highest the market will bear. So the market realities are very, very important. Letting the seller understand that we're marketers, we as agents, we're marketers, we're advisors, and we're strategists. But we as real estate agents, we don't set the price. And they as sellers, the only price they're truly setting is the price that they would basically buy the property back, meaning there is a price point that they themselves have become the highest bidder. And sometimes they don't understand that. So we have to explain, I don't set the price. I'm a marketer, I'm an advisor, I'm a strategist. I work with you in partnership to make sure that we meet your goals, but I don't set the price. And the truth of the matter is that the seller doesn't set the price either. It's really the buyers who are in the market right now looking to buy who have the ability to buy. What we do together is we discover through testing and exposure what that price is. How can we maximize that price? And in the absence of that, we use a fishing technique, which I'm going to talk to you just a little bit later. But at the end of the day, it's the buyers who set the price. It's the buyers who are buying. We cannot outmarket the wrong price, we as agents. We can't outspend it with our marketing. It is our job to expose it to the highest number of qualified buyers. But I like to make a line, and I say there's a price that above this price, no matter what I do, we are not going to be able to sell for this price. On the other end, there's a price that you can sell and you don't need me to be involved at all. You can sell this and you will be able to sell it tomorrow, right? In every property, there are these two prices. But between those two prices, there's kind of an arch. And that arch is the highest the market will bear. And if that is the goal, then we're going to work together through this strategy to make sure that you get the highest the market will bear, but that you actually do sell. Now, saying that, there's also some sellers that they're not willing to sell if they don't get their price, meaning below that, it's worth it to them to keep. That's okay as long as they tell you that and they're honest with you. What can become frustrating is they either say they're not willing to sell below a certain price, but really they could if the market shows them. So you have to really become very skilled at really trying to get to their true motivation and understanding where they are. Sometimes they don't want to kind of tip their hat to us and show us where they are, but we need to really understand where they are. I do sometimes take properties where there is a price that they won't sell below, but we have a conversation where I say, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to sell for that price. I will do all the marketing. I will do everything for sure, just everything. But we need to have an understanding up front that I, as your agent, don't think that price is achievable. If we don't tell them that, if we don't have that open, honest conversation, what will happen is they will often blame us if the property doesn't sell. And then they'll go and relist with somebody else when it expires. And they become very frustrated with us. They can become very demanding with us. They can want us to do all kinds of crazy things. And that's why I'm saying we can't outmarket the wrong price. And one thing that sellers love to do, if they're not convinced that they're in partnership with their agent, is they will demand more and more in marketing. And we, if we're not strong with our conversations, we will feel pressed to do that to keep them happy. And then we'll spend a ton of money, we'll spend a ton of emotions and bandwidth trying to meet a price that we know is not going to work to make their goals a reality. I always like to say, I could want to sell at a, Rolls Royce price, but maybe I have a very nice Mercedes. Buyers are not going to pay a Rolls Royce price for a very nice Mercedes. I mean, all things equal, you understand what I'm saying? We can't make buyers buy that. We need to highlight it to the highest level of the best Mercedes buyers who would pay the most for that particular car. So like I said, having scripts, I always like to ask up front if I have permission to be honest. I normally ask that in the listing presentation itself, but if not, very early on. And sellers are often a little bit taken aback by that. And I say something to the degree like, do you want the truth or what you want to hear? Kind of like an attorney or a physician, a financial planner. They are going to tell you what you need to hear so that you can make the best possible decisions. They're not going to tell you what you want to hear. If we're sick, the doctor is not going to sugarcoat us being sick. He's going to tell us the unfortunate truth. And a lot of that is with pricing too. So if you kind of set yourself up in the position of a trusted advisor, a professional, they will understand that a little bit more. And of course, they're going to say, yes, I want the truth. So just setting that up front, you might not need to have a conversation, a kind of honest conversation until months into the listing, but you've already kind of set the parameters that when needed, you will be telling them the truth, even if they don't want to have. So we need to lead with honesty and permission to be honest. We need to protect the relationship with them. We need to continue to build and elicit trust from our sellers that we think that they believe we're doing the best possible to get them whatever their end goal is. Like I said, it might be the highest in the market will bear. It might be a quick whatever it is, but they need to have trust that we are not just either throwing it in the MLS and just hoping for the best, or that we're just, pushing for a lower price just to get an easy sell. They need to understand there is no other option. And you lead that through kind of the realities of the market. You can't sugarcoat things, and understanding what they want, and so that they feel that you are working to help them get what they want, that breeds loyalty from them. And we need loyalty. We need their confidence that we are doing everything possible to help them achieve their goals. So part of it is also the art and science of setting the right expectations, which is being specific, letting them know week by week what to expect, how many showings do we typically have in a week, how many views might we expect online. As much as I don't like Zillow, which I don't, but you can use Zillow or homes.com, which is kind of the big consumer facing portals. We can show them how many views we're having, we can show them how many saves we're having, and you will become knowledgeable at how many showings you might expect in a week. So at this price point, let's go back to our early example. I think it's a $2.7 million home. Seller took everything I said, but he's like, no, I want to come out and I want to try 3.5. Let's say, okay, no problem. At this price point, I know based on my experience that we should be having at least 1 or 2 showings a week. As long as we continue to have 1 or 2 showings a week, we are in the we're in the range. Or maybe it's 3 showings a week. Maybe in your market it's 10 showings a week. Whatever it is, by telling them up front, I say we should be having this many showings a week. If we're not, we are kind of missing the mark with the price. We're missing our pool of buyers. If we're getting a lot of views, if we're getting high saves, but we're not getting showings, we are not close enough yet in price where the buyers, the pool of buyers really believe that we're in the market. So setting those expectations up front. And also you will determine over time approximately how many actual showings normally translate into an offer. So in my market, again, in the higher price points, 7, 8, 9, 10 showings max will normally translate to an offer. If we're now 20 showings in and I've already told them, then they're going to understand that price is probably what's driving this. We're getting the showings. We're getting almost to the end line, which is an offer, but we're not getting the offer. That means that we're off with our price. So just setting those expectations up front. So like I said, I like to use the fishing for the buyer pool, the pool of buyers. Where are they? So if the fish are the buyers and we are the fishermen, which is us, the agents and the sellers, and we're in a boat and we drop our line down into the water, but our fish are over here and we drop our line way over here, we might get a few nibbles, but we're not going to get a lot of traction. We're not going to get things tugging on our line. We're not going to get much. And what we can do is we can monitor the views online. Again, the main ones would be Zillow and Homes. Of course, we have our special premium listing distribution sites like Raw Report, Wall Street Journal, whatever that you use. But those are so small that you're going to get maybe 10, 20, 30 views per month on each of those sites, where you might be getting hundreds, if not thousands, on the big sites that the consumers use. I don't love those sites, but again, it's something that we can use as a benchmark. And then we see how many saves we're getting, and then we see how many showings. And each one of those metrics is a signal to how the market is responding to our price strategy. So we watch that, and I set the tone up front with the seller so they know what to watch for. They know, and I'm going to share with them on a monthly basis, or if you're in, say, California where things go quickly, maybe you're sharing on a weekly basis. If you're in a place that's a little bit slower, maybe you're sharing on a monthly basis, but you're sharing how many views we're getting, how many saves, how many showings. And if we've already set the metrics up front, they know what to be looking for. If you have high views and low showings, we're probably very overpriced, at least 10, 20% potentially. If you have high showings and no offers, you're a lot closer. You might only be 5 or 10% off. So we like to think about pricing as like casting the fishing line. And as you move your fishing line closer and closer to the pool of fish, that's your price. Your price. So we talk about pricing strategy and price improvement. We like to use that language of a price improvement rather than a price reduction or a price drop or something like that. It just goes smoother. But setting all these tones up front with the seller and giving them the data, again, it could be weekly, it could be bi-weekly or bi-monthly, it could be monthly, but having it in saying, and what this means is going to give them the information to make the right decisions about if they're going to adjust their price or not. Okay. So the data, again, we're talking about the data. The data is what really builds trust. So they see, especially if we're explaining the data, they see that we're not just throwing out low priced offers to make a deal. We really have data to back up our suggestions to them. We're going to look at when we start the listing, we're going to benchmark what are the days on market for other properties of the similar price point, the similar location. We're also going to benchmark the months of inventory and the listed to sold ratio, meaning list to sale ratio. We're going to benchmark that. And then at least every month, if you're in a market where luxury properties take multiple months to sell, or if you're in a hotter market, you might do a weekly, but you're going to be looking and comparing, is the days on market staying the same? Is the months of inventory staying the same? Is the sold to list price ratio staying the same? Or are the metrics changing in a direction that is indicating it's becoming more of a buyer's market or more of a seller's market? And in explaining that on a monthly basis, if you're in an area again that you're going to have your listing for multiple months, you can be helping them stay ahead of the market. Because what we don't want to do, and what your sellers for sure don't want to do, is chase the market down, meaning they are always reacting a month or two behind the metrics. And if they had adjusted earlier, if they had made a price adjustment earlier, they might have sold for higher than if they waited a month or 2 or 3 months down. And so sometimes sellers like to say, oh, well, I'm not in a rush, or that's one of their favorite things. I'm not in a rush. But part of our honest conversation is explaining how staying on the market too long is not a good thing. And we like to break it down in your price point in this area. It should take approximately, let's say, 90 days to sell. 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year. You have to look in that price point in your area, what's the average days on market, and explain to them what we can do as a strategy is we can take that days on market, let's say it's 90, and we're going to break it into thirds, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, right? We can test the market for the first third. So the first month, we can test the market and we can see. For the second month, we need to do some kind of price strategy change, aka price improvement, price change. We need to do some kind of price change because we need to get serious, because by the last third, that 60 to 90 days, if the average days on market is 90, in that 60 to 90 day time frame, we really need to get serious with our price. So if by the time we get to the third, we definitely need to adjust and get serious with our price strategy, because we want to be under contract before the average days on market. Because if we start to go beyond that, the price becomes stale, the listing becomes stale. And we're going to talk about that, because that is almost the kiss of death with a property. We're also going to check on a monthly basis new listings that are similar to ours, so that we can share, hey, this listing has just come on the market, and look at the price compared to us. We're also going to look at what's expired, because a lot of times they've seen another property that they think is very similar to theirs, and they price theirs in tandem with that property. But just because that's listed doesn't mean it's going to sell. And I see this a lot. And so if all of a sudden that expires, we need to tell them that. We need to let them know, because they're still going to be using that as their benchmark. And that person might be completely wackadoodle with their price. Or if ones that they were tracking as their most similar all of a sudden had a big price adjustment, or it went under contract, we need to be sharing that information with them. And like I said, we also need to be kind of tracking list to sales price ratio, so that they know what to expect and they can track how that's doing. Data, like bring data into every single conversation. Back up what you're saying with evidence. It removes them thinking that you're doing something about them, and it creates clarity, and it kind of cuts through their attachment to the property, because we really want them to see it in the eyes of a buyer. Right now, I have a property that I'm probably going to list. I have in my head kind of my aspirational pricing that I would love to get. But when I kind of remove my own attachment to the property, because I'm very attached to the property, when I remove my own attachment from the property and I try to look at it in the eyes of a buyer, and I say, at this price, my aspirational price as a seller, would I buy this right now in today's market? Would I buy it for this price as a buyer? And if I'm honest with myself, I would not. So I go down one kind of bracket. Would I buy it at this price in today's market with everything related to the house and everything else? Probably still not. I go down another bracket and I think, would I buy it? Yes, I would buy it. So anything above that, if I'm the seller and I'm priced here, but the market is here, anything above that, I've become my own buyer. I've bought it back. And if they're cool with that, fine. But a lot of times them understanding that and understanding there's a good chance that it might not sell. Like I just did a pricing exercise earlier with some other agents this morning. And we saw that in a specific market that we were looking at, there's a 15 months of inventory for oceanfront homes in a specific area. 15 months. Or maybe that would have been 6 months of inventory in the past few years. So explaining what that means to a seller, that means that there's a large number of homes that are probably just not going to sell at all. They need to understand that that's the plan B. So if they're really attached to a high price, explaining, okay, I get it. I understand, you don't want to sell past that or, under this. Let's talk about plan B. And sometimes just even saying, let's talk about plan B is so surprising to them because they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, if it doesn't sell for what you want, are you going to keep it? Are you going to rent it? Are you going to move back in? Like, what's your plan B? Let's talk about it so you're prepared. And sometimes that's enough too for them to understand, oh, gosh, there's a good chance it won't sell because there's so many other homes on the market and some homes are being competitive with their pricing. So having that kind of conversation as well. Marketing metrics that matter. Like I said, we're going to track and share with them views, saves, reach, engagement. If we have social media, what are we doing to get it out there? How many views have we gotten? What kind of inquiries have we gotten? What's the agent feedback from people who have actually shown it? If you have a feedback system where you get feedback, please be getting feedback and sharing it with your sellers. It might not be price. Maybe it's condition. Maybe it's landscaping. Maybe it's all kinds of stuff. Almost always, again, price is a great equalizer. So getting that feedback and sharing it with them. And then exposure versus performance. So we want to expose it, but we also need performance, meaning we need to actually have showings. We need to help them see, again, we can have great marketing, we can have great exposure, but what we really need is buyers who are saving it, coming, doing showings, and then ultimately actually making offers. The other thing I like to explain to them up front, especially if we're in an unstable market, is the first offer is almost always the best offer. I don't mean the number the first offer is, but typically the first buyer, because that buyer has normally been on the market, they've lost multiple properties or they've missed out, they're ready to go, they're enthusiastic, and they see that it's new on the market. So there's that newness part around it. So they're excited and they're like, yes, and they're really willing to at least negotiate. And it's almost always the case, not 100%, but almost always the case. The first offer is always the best offer. I like to share that up front. And excuse me, one sec. That we don't want to become stale, right? That's the number one thing we're looking out for. I also like to explain to them that sometimes the offer is like being asked to dance. Sometimes they're upset about an offer, but that's like being asked to dance. They asked us to dance. They asked us to negotiate versus all the other houses on the market. And if you go to, say, a high school dance and you're standing on the wall and nobody's asking you to dance, you're not dancing. So it's the same thing. At least we're getting an offer, and we try to work every offer. We take ego out of it, and we try to work every offer to the maximum that we possibly can, so that they see if they do get an offer lower than they expect, let's just counter it. Let's take emotion out of it. Let's counter it. Let's see how high we can possibly get, because they did ask us to dance, and sometimes that's the win. So let's talk a little bit about the true cost of overpricing. There's a cost to the seller and there's a cost to us. The cost to the seller is you risk becoming stale. And we'll talk about stale in just a second. The cost to both of us is time, money, energy, emotional bandwidth. It can get very frustrating for them. If they're still living in the house, they often have to do a lot of upkeep to the house to keep it show ready. They have to do a lot of things to get it ready for every single showing. They have to do a lot of stuff to get out of the house for allow for showing. They have probably very high holding costs. And then for us, it's our marketing money. It's our time working on this listing versus working on getting other listings or negotiating other deals. It's emotional bandwidth, especially if they start to beat us up. I always say we want motivated, realistic, and nice sellers. We do not want every seller. And especially if you are in a market where your listing inventory for higher priced is going higher and higher and higher in your MLS, you don't want every seller. You want the motivated, realistic, and nice sellers. Otherwise, you could spend so much time, money, and emotional bandwidth trying to achieve an unachievable dream with a price that just doesn't work for particular sellers. And then, of course, there's reputation management for us as well. The risk to our reputation can be really high if all of a sudden our stats are, our properties need tons of price reductions, and our properties expire a lot, and our properties stay on the market a long time. That's not a good stat to have, because people aren't realizing if you're having all those things, it's a pricing issue, which it almost always is. They're thinking that you just are not doing a good job, right? So there's a double-sided risk of overpricing, extremely overpricing. You can overprice a little as long as you're on board with the sellers to sell well, but it can really beat you up. It can be deflating, and it can be frustrating. And you don't want to carry that baggage into every future listing conversation either. The stale listing effect, we talked about that, what it signals to buyers. And I'm going to say, and you guys can drop in the comments or say to yourself, what happens when a buyer sees a listing that's been on the market a long time? Their number one phrase, what's wrong with it? Because this is the dejected property that people didn't take, maybe for 60 days, 180 days, 360 days, whatever. They say, what's wrong with it? It loses its urgency. There's no more excitement around it. And if you go too long, first, if you're too high in the beginning, the realistic, nice buyers, the buyers normally willing to pay a really good price, they don't want to make an offer because often they don't want to insult the seller, right? So they're not making an offer because the disconnect between where they think it is and where the seller has it priced is too large that they're not willing to insult the seller. They say that a lot. The people who make offers when it's too high are lowball type people because they don't care. But then they often make it lower than what the market would really bear if it was priced properly. So there's two different buyers out there. There's the ones who are willing to pay the highest the market will bear. They're the ones often don't want to upset the seller. And then there's the bargain hunters, the deal makers, those people, they make lowball offers. And if you go stale, if you're on the market much longer than days on market average for that price point, that area, the longer you go, the lower the offers become. Because now you've opened up the door to all the discount seekers who think you must be desperate. So it's really, really important. You can test the market, but it's really, really important to have those honest conversations so that they adjust to the market realities quickly and they stay in front of the market changes. So if you've got a case study, if you've got proof of strategy, where you've got a story of what happened with somebody who overpriced, share that. Don't share it in a scary way. Just share them that understand. Like I said, using data and confidence together along the way, sharing feedback, sharing data along the way, that's what's going to equate for a sale. When you adjust pricing, like I said, we don't talk about price drop. We talk about price improvement. Also, quick tip, every time if you do some kind of price change, then change the front picture. change the main picture so it comes up fresh. When it comes up fresh and people and agents who have searches already set up, it will come up fresh. And just talking about data, explaining it, sharing all along the way. You need to over educate. If anything, they will understand, and they will understand that what you're trying to really do is protect their time and the value of their property. If you don't lead, they'll leave. Meaning, if you are not having these conversations, if you are not being a leader with them, they will blame you. End of story. And what they'll do is they'll let it expire and they'll relist with somebody else, and they'll often relist at the price that you've been saying all along the way, because we just didn't do a good job educating them all along the way of the market, the marketing, and the feedback. It's very, very frustrating. So you can't be quiet. You can't share things they need to know out of fear of them being upset. You've got to be proactive. Otherwise, they're going to make you the scapegoat. Happens every single time. You've got to speak up to steer the ship, because they're going to go with advice anyway. It's just going to be yours or somebody else's. So let's wrap it up. We're almost done with this, and then we can open it up for a few questions. Your role is to incubate confidence with your seller, to make sure through the reports, through the feedback, and you've got to stay in contact with them. You can't have them chasing you down for feedback. You can't have them chasing you down, because if they're chasing you down, they already feel you're not doing anything. So your job is to protect their confidence in you with the process. You need to show up. You need to give them information. And you have to help them interpret the results. You have to help interpret what's going on. So final thoughts and action steps. You've got to take leadership early as the trusted advisor. Not telling them what to do, as a trusted advisor, giving them the information, explaining what it means. Say you're there with them. You want to protect their time, their asset. You want them to reach whatever their goal is, and you're there with them to get there. You're going to use truth as a strategy. You're not going to fluff things up. You're not going to hide away. And you do need to build kind of a system around feedback, a system around data, a system around what I like to say is, if we do a price adjustment, we might do a big new blast. We might do an event, something like that. So they see that you are not getting bored of the listing either, that you are always pulling out something fresh. With our marketing plan, we normally don't come out of the gun with all the things all at once. We stretch out our marketing over, every month something new, but we always have something coming out. So at the end of the day, it's your professionalism. It isn't about being right. It's about being prepared, honest, and consistent. If you do the right thing and you keep your sellers educated, you inform them, you do your marketing, you give them the data, your sellers will never want to work with anyone else again, because they will see that you are there. You're going to do your very best. You're going to keep them updated, and you're going to treat them as your principals, your clients, to make the very best decisions based on the information you give them, instead of like pushing it down or hiding away. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then see if there's any questions that anybody's had along the way. Let's see. Okay, so Samantha said, oh, hi, Samantha's in Southwest Missouri. What is the formula to figure out what luxury is in our own area? Yeah, so it's a pretty easy formula. The Institute of Luxury Home Marketing calls the top 10% luxury in a specific area. I actually find that the top 10% is really like the starter luxury price point. The top 5% in your market is probably closer to really what luxury is. And then the top 1% is uber luxury. The problem is a lot of people often only think of that top 1%. So it's really easy. Just go into your MLS, search residential sales. You can go 6 months back. You can go a year back, whatever. See how many sold, not active. And then the top 10%. So let's say 6,000 sold in the last 6 months. 600 would be the top 10%. So I just go into the MLS, sort them, highest price to lowest. And then I scroll down to the 600th property when it's sorted highest to lowest. And whatever that price break is above is starter luxury for your area. Then I scroll up to 300 because that's the top 5%. And now that is really where luxury probably truly starts. And then the top 1% is the uber luxury price point. So it's actually very, very super easy. You can do that for your whole MLS, or if you want to drill down, you can do it for your county, things like that. So hopefully that was useful. Oh, thanks there. How are you doing? I appreciate it. So have a few minutes, super help. Yep. Okay, Janet. I had a super challenging listing in 2024, tons of deferred maintenance, heirs own the property, and I had to work through the trust. That can be super challenging, Karen. That can be super, super challenging. When you've got properties like that, you just have to make the decision of, is it worth it to you to take that listing or not? Because sometimes, again, we don't want all the listings. We want the motivated, realistic, and nice sellers. Otherwise, they can put you through the meat grinder and you don't end up with a sale. What you've done is you have basically primed up and teed up a beautiful sale to the next agent. And that happens a lot. So it can be super challenging. Okay, Mark says, how do you handle pricing a property when the seller doesn't want to tell you what they want to list their home at? Well, a lot of times they're not going to tell you because they want to hear from you. But I always try to get out of them in advance what they'd like to list, so that we can have a conversation if that's realistic or not. And if they're too far off, you might have to have the conversation, say, if I took this listing and I told you that would be achievable, I couldn't feel good about it because I really don't think it is. I would love to get you that price. I really would love to get you that price. I just don't see the market there right now. I don't see the market responding to that price. If you're okay with it not selling as an eventuality, and if you as the agent are willing to take it, I will do all the marketing possible, but we need to have frequent conversations. But if somebody's expectation is just too far out there, remember, it's probably best to have a great relationship with them and say, hey, if anything changes, I'd happy to take a look at, because it's sometimes good to let it go through the first listing agent who takes all the body hits, does all the marketing, everything like that to get to the appropriate price. And then it expires and they maybe relist with you. But please take it to heart. We don't want all the listings. We want the motivated, realistic, and nice sellers. Let's see. Rinaldi says, where's the best place to gather all the market metrics to share with the seller? Do you compile that and the date show them with your listing presentation? Yes. So your MLS should have that. You might be able to have to manually pull it, or you might be able to pull it. There might be things within your MLS where you can pull it. But your MLS should be able to have that, or your broker or your board or a third party might be able to get great data for you as well. But your MLS should definitely be able to pull it for you. Joe says, is there a proven shareable methodology to pricing luxury homes versus average homes? No, there is not. It is an art as much as it is a science. So it starts to become really important that you really educate yourselves in the area where you're looking to sell, and you'll start to get a feel for it. So if you are becoming a luxury agent, or you already are, you just have to start to get your feel for, so I'm in an area, we have golf, waterfront, historic homes. So I know linear feet on the ocean, the more linear feet on the ocean or linear feet on a river will be more important than the square footage of the home or the age of the home or the ceiling height. Well, so you will start to get kind of a feel. And I would set up a hot sheet in your MLS for the higher priced properties in your market. And every day I would spend a little bit of time being a student of your market. What's coming on the market? What's having price adjustments? What's expiring unsold? What are things selling at? Read the description, spend some time looking at the amenities and things like that, so you really start to understand it. And there's lots of different things you can do. Like I like to do a gut check against the tax values. I like to do that tranche method where I break out in things where buyers are actually buying and look at that. And it becomes a real art just as much as a science for properties that have a lot of comps. If you have a lot of comps, it's super easy. But as you go up in price point, a lot of times you have fewer and fewer comps. So how tiny of an area would you consider really to dial into the luxury area? We are bordering next to one of the highest luxury areas. So what I would do If you're wanting to dial in and really become known for an area, you need to figure out how much you want to make, right? Income wise. You need to figure out what's the average sales price of those higher priced properties in that area. And then you need to see, okay, if I was able to get, say, 10% of the closed transactions, if I was able to get 10% of the closed transactions in that price point, in that area, what would that equate to commission wise, dollars to me wise? And is that large enough? Or do I need to go a little bit larger? You need to make sure you're doing a large enough area that, you know, you could get several transactions a year. So you need to just see how many transactions are happening within that, and then see. A dominant agent normally doesn't have more than 10 or 20% of any area anyway, closed transactions. So if you were to become the dominant agent and get 10 to 20% of the transactions, would that meet your income goal for that specific area? And that will help you kind of back into that. Oh, we can't hear you, Jerry.
So that was awesome. A lot of questions came in on that one, and everybody loves it. So thank you so much for what a content you're able to provide today. And guys, we are going to keep going live. So she's like, Janie's here every what's the second week of every month.
The second Wednesday
on Instagram, on YouTube now, and she is just a wealth of content, a wealth of knowledge, guys. So feel free to keep jumping in. Do me a favor, if you liked what you heard, guys, drop in the comment. Just give her some shout outs. That'd be amazing. And then, Janie, I think we're going to go and sign off, and then we will see you again next month.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Janie. Have a good one.
Bye.